didn't have really any IT or IT sec background. And so the CLO reported to the CEO, but then she was separate from the CIO. So communication between the two was difficult, or it didn't happen much. So it seemed like the clear-cut roles and accountability wasn't there.
And then next in our presentation, we spoke about what these attackers could be charged with. And as I mentioned in the video, it all boiled down to what was the attacker's intent. First and foremost, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1984. And from that, there are a few other things we can charge them with on a federal level. Computer fraud abuse, cause intentional damage. There's also wire fraud, which doesn't necessarily mean has to involve money. It can mean data coming over the wire. And then there's also some local laws in Georgia that they could also be hit with crimes like identity theft, computer fraud, and so on. And then we, as a consultancy company, we wanted to highlight the fact that because there was a rogue IP coming from China, we couldn't ignore the fact that this could be a foreign government or a nation state having an attack on Equifax itself.
Next, I talked a little bit about compliance laws and how they would have affected had they been in place at the time, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act. I know going forward, there's also the New York Shield Act, and hopefully we'll develop more going forward.
Okay, I guess my turn now. Next, I spoke about several different ways you would have to ramify this. I split up into two categories. There are things you would have to do for your PR and the cyber things you'd have to do. PR was stuff like, actually you let the people know about the breach, pretty much get a lawyer on your side who knows what they're doing to pretty much convince everyone it's not your fault. And on the technical side, we had stuff like we do your fastest strong password security and encrypt your data. Encryption, that was kind of a big one here. Next.
And then at the end, I talked about the public relations overview, and pretty much I just spoke about how Equifax handled everything, the entire breach, how they handled the delay response, how top-level executives weren't notified at the time of the breach, and at the same time, how some of these top-level executives had sold their stocks, which was pretty shady on Equifax's part. How can you find out that there's a breach, not find out that there's a breach, and then you sell your stocks before? And at the same time, how their PR sent out a tweet, which brought in a lot of people to really see that Equifax wasn't really handling this in a proper way. And at the same time, even when Equifax tried to help, their system where they implemented, which was Equifax2017.com, it was like flagged as a phishing site because they made an entire new website to help new people. And at the same time, it wasn't really that secured as well, because some of the information that the people had to put in who thought they were hacked or were hacked, they had to add in some personal information, which could have actually been stolen again if, the hackers found a way to steal all their information again. And there was just a lot that was going on that Equifax really could have handled it a whole lot better, but their whole public relations team didn't really do that well in trying to send out a proper apology to the people that were affected by this hack.
And then lastly, we summed up the presentation with our board recommendations. One of the recommendations that we mentioned were using outside companies to help facilitate some change in the company. We mentioned even using tools like Nessus just to scan for vulnerabilities, other companies like CyberArk, Cybereason, VigiTrust. So using experts who have made a great product and using them to your advantage. And also there were some other ones too, if other people want to speak of.
Great.
Yeah, so
Thank
like,
you.
oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Molly.
Okay. So some other board recommendations are basically looking out for problems, protecting the information, and if there is an attack, you need to respond to it. And then if there is data that has been lost, try to recover as much as you can of it. It's very important.
We also tried to sort of gear our response towards people, process, technology. Definitely hiring the right people is important. Security awareness training, processes, following standards, network segmentation, and different types of technology we could use, IDS, IPS, SIAM systems. Just definitely covering all our bases to try and keep our company safe in the most ways possible.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your great presentation. Again, my name is Alex Pazay. Happy to see you here, and congratulations to being so far again, be in three best teams for this competition. Great job, everyone. So building from the end, the recommendation to the board, from a high level overview, what do you think was biggest problem at Equifax? Was it the lack of technology, lack of people, or lack of proper processes?
Honestly, it was the lack of process. They had bad compliance, and thus this hack went on for incredibly long before they found out. Sure, it's when people get hacked, that happens, but if they had better process, they probably would have found out about it probably maybe the day of or day after, instead of happening weeks later.
Yeah, pretty much Equifax had this problem, this vulnerability in their system. And just by doing like a simple scan throughout their entire system, they could have found this vulnerability really quick. And none of this would have happened to begin with if they had just been on top of their game the entire time and just, figured out that they had a vulnerability in their system. It would have been simple to just scan everything.
And to
Yeah, and I
piggyback
also-
off the, I'm sorry.
Oh, you can go.
Molly.
Sorry.
Thank you. To piggyback off that, if in terms of processes in regards to the certificate expiration, Equifax went on record with the GAO stating that it was a misconfiguration. It's a misconfiguration if that certificate expires and you don't recognize that it expires for a day, 2 days, maybe even a week, that's fine. But the fact that this certificate went unnoticed for months on end, that's not a misconfiguration. That's just a downright, mistake, and that shouldn't have happened. So there needs to be a better process in place that does not happen again.
Yeah, and then also there was like a lack of communication. Like no one was really sure what they were supposed to do in terms of like security.
Great, thank you.
Hi everyone. This is Radhika. First of all, congratulations, a wonderful presentation. Congratulations for making for the top 3 teams. Building upon the summary and what Alex just asked about the key issue or the key challenge here, most of the times cybersecurity teams are really dealing with like budgetary constraints, having to prove the return on investments of the cybersecurity measures that they can put in place. So if your team is appointed by the board and board could only approve any 2 of your recommendations from the budget perspective, which 2 you would recommend or move forward with the execution, and why, and how that will play a role in addressing these challenges for future?
Okay, I'll start with one first to give my team a chance to do the other, but I would say encryption would probably be our strongest one that we would want to implement, as that is usually not that expensive to implement on its own and helps quite a lot. If there's another breach, at least the hackers won't be able to read the data. Okay, I'm going to push out to someone else who wants to talk about the second one.
I definitely think security awareness training. I think having everyone on the same page, excuse me, definitely helps. I think having a clear process of communication and channels and incident response is crucial to an organization. And I think a lot of the problems from this Equifax hack happened due to lack of communication, lack of proper knowledge of everyone's role in the company.
I would just add to what Shira said in terms of that cybersecurity, it can't just be, like the people who are doing information security. It has to be the board, everybody needs to be accountable. It can't just be, the problem of people who are, taking care of just security. Like accountability everybody needs to be made aware.
Mhm. Because people, and building on that, because people will be targeted, employees will be targeted by phishing attempts and other sorts of viruses in their own workspaces. There isn't time to go directly to the people who are in charge of cybersecurity and ask every question. You have to be aware and know how to make choices on your own.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, it's Alicia Cade. Congratulations, team. You've made it to the finals, and I wish you all the best of luck. Going on what Fredrik has mentioned, what would be the top priorities? I kind of want to take a different angle as well. You've really highlighted pretty well about what went wrong and therefore what we need to improve. In terms of kind of immediate actions. Of course, an incident like this for any company means loss of clients, penalties, loss of reputation, big stuff. What would you think should be long-term board and company's strategy to recover from this incident and actually reestablish its reputation?
Okay, this is another thing I covered. So I would say multiple things. One is exactly if you actually want to do it properly, you'll provide proper identity management and identity management for your clients that were affected. Thus, they can now know if their identity was compromised, and that thus this brings back a bit of trust. Also, you should make as much as you can public without compromising. More like show, oh, we added this and this and this, as that will show customers that you're really attempting to improve. Obviously, don't reveal your encryption keys, but you can say we're using encryption. And third, again, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes really you just get a lawyer. A lawyer can help a lot in court, as if the court rules that actually you weren't at fault, it's going to help quite a lot.
To piggyback
Also,
off of
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
to piggyback off of Joseph, pretty much to gain back the trust of like the people that were affected by this, I think a company should hold accountability for what had happened and actually accept the what had happened to them, because as explained before, Equifax didn't really send out an actual apology to the people. They just pretty much try to push it away and not really take responsibility. And to people like regular people like us who were affected by this, that's something nobody really wants to hear from a company. They want to hear them apologize and actually take accountability for what had happened. And then in the future, the company can show that they've learned from this and actually update all their systems, have all their certificates up to date, and actually show that they're trying to make a difference. So a hack like that never happens again to the people.
Thank you very much.
Would in terms of the legal aspect, sorry about my voice. I have a little bit of cold. You guys did a great job, by the way, and congratulations on getting here. And we're very happy to have you. Could you talk a little bit more about the regulatory obligations that Equifax was subject to?
Shira, if you don't mind, I'll start off, and if you want to piggyback off some of the stuff that I say. So regulatory obligations, Equifax, because they're a financial institution, as I mentioned by the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, they had to abide by the Safeguards Rule, Section 5A of the Federal Trade Commission Act, and they also had to abide by Sections 501 through 504 of the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. The Safeguards Rule is going to state that they must store sensitive data securely and ensure that when that data is transferred, it's secured. Section 5A of the FTC Act is going to state that Equifax must provide reasonable security for sensitive personal identifiable information. And section 501 to 504 talks about Equifax's privacy policies and that security practice must be aligned with their privacy policy.
Yes, I would only add that moving forward, Equifax has a responsibility of following the CCPA and the SHIELD Act for New York or California residents, and that includes allowing people or residents to decide how much of their data they're comfortable with them having, and giving them the option of deleting that data without penalty should they want to.
Okay, that's great. Could you tell me a little bit more about breach notification requirements? Breach notification requirements that Equifax was subject to once the breach was discovered.
Oh, they had 72 once the breach was notified, they had 72 hours to actually notify, or 24 hours to notify the public that there was a breach. And it took them almost a month to notify the public that they were breached. And that pretty much goes against the law that they had to notify the public about them being breached.
And which jurisdiction's law was that?
I mean, technically, GDRP. So if they had any clients in Europe, it would have violated this regulation.
And okay. Could you tell me a little bit about the criminal penalties, a little bit more about the criminal penalties? You had a great analysis there, but how would it work if it was in fact a foreign nation state actor?
Sure thing. So if it came out to prove that it was foreign government, we would be looking at charges of computer fraud, conspiracy, economic espionage, and conspiracy to commit economic espionage. And from that, the U.S. government, the FBI, will take over the investigation from that point and look to charge those nation-state actors. The U.S. now has gone in a direction where we're beginning to charge the individuals from overseas that are directly responsible for this. So the FBI would take over the investigation, charge each individual with those crimes, and indict them in court, and that's what they would do.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about, that was great, a little bit about what the legal compliance posture looks like going forward for Equifax? What should they do to kind of ensure maximum mitigation of liability and compliance with the regulatory frameworks prospectively?
First and foremost, they need to put protocols in place that are going to provide these technical, physical, and procedural safeguards for consumer data on all company networks, first and foremost. From there, the company's privacy policy, we need to limit who's having access to this PII. If a hacker does breach the system, we have to make sure that somebody who works for customer service doesn't have access to maybe somebody's social security number. So that's also something they should do.
I would also add on network segmentation. I think a lot of this happened because once they were in, they were able to laterally just move through. So definitely having segmented networks, implement least privileges, just the less people that have information that they're not supposed to, maybe the less entrances that malicious attackers might have.
Okay, that was great. Thank you.
One more question is if through your research you identified a commercial product that you would recommend to be deployed that customers. So again, choosing one, so you'll have to prioritize.
That's a very good question. So if we had to choose one, you're talking about one of the 4 companies you mentioned at the very end from our board recommendations?
Yep, for anywhere.
I think if we had to prioritize, speaking for myself and the group in general, I would say CyberArk. through their privileged access management system, something we learned about in our university. A big problem here was the fact that passwords were stored in plain text and stuff like that, and that just can't happen. So I think, having this access management system is just bare bones, needs to happen. And I think CyberArk has a great product that's something that really could have helped Equifax at the time.
I always like to hear it when INAME is made a priority. So from my perspective, I agree.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more quick question before we have to wrap up.
Just a quick question, maybe just to summarize and to give it a little bit perspective to the board and to the company itself. Where do you see the role of cybersecurity in the future of Equifax? It's supposed to be under risk function, IT function, or it's supposed to be a separate function within an organization?
I actually see it as a separate function because it encompasses everything, as now of the breach they've probably seen that you can that everything was affected by this, that it should be a separate function that can communicate with all the different branches of the company equally and quickly, so that if something bad happens, they can quickly recover from it and do damage control.
But it has to, piggybacking off that, it has to be aligned with the company's, goal, mission, and make sure that it helps, the cybersecurity posture helps Equifax accomplish, what it doesn't get in the way, like sort of complements it.
All right, well,
thank you.
CSU Security, thank you so much for this interview. I think you've done a terrific job. Thank you very much for participating in the competition. I am going to email you all three teams a little later today with the description of the next steps, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much for your terrific job with the presentation, and hopefully you will participate again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Good luck.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Day, everybody.